That vignette is a little bit sobering for many of you, for those of you who have served in a combat zone and have loved and lost. You know exactly what those gentlemen are speaking of. As I said earlier, I retired from the military in 2005. And upon my return, I saw a place up here in Minnesota that was, frankly, much different than I had anticipated. And by that I mean the war that I had just come from was not reflected in the media, was not reflected consistent with the experience that I had. And I felt compelled, as a soldier now retired, to report back to the American people what exactly is going on in Iraq. What exactly is your military doing in Iraq? And that supersedes the issue, the political issue, of why Iraq at all. And I'll address that in a minute. I think as a nation, as a state, we struggle with that question. Not so much today as we did just a few years ago and during the last presidential campaign. But I wrote a book because I wanted to tell the story of my experience, a warrior speaking in his own words, as you saw those gentlemen speak to you a few minutes ago. I also wanted to honor the memory of the soldiers who served under my command, who died in service to their country. Irrespective of the political question of their service was voluntary, and they knew that the ultimate sacrifice might be their end state. All of us knew that. All who go today and will go tomorrow know that. And the difference between your Army just 20, 30 years ago is that our Army, since 1973, our Marine Corps, our Air Force, our Navy, all of our services are volunteer, as it should be in an American democracy. But moreover, that force is still, if not the best in the world, it's number one, and number two is fading far behind. But that's because our military is made up of our citizens. Our military is our electorate. Make no mistake about that. I also wanted to do one other thing with this book, and that was to attempt to dispel some of the myths about what the military was doing or is doing in Iraq. And the book I wrote is about Iraq because that's where my experience as a commander was. Although I was in Afghanistan, I did a staff job. And for those of you who served in the military, it's not quite as exciting. You get a lot of paper cuts. You might get your butt chewed now and again, or you might spill some coffee on the computer while you're making that PowerPoint and have to start over again. But save that, it's definitely not the same experience as commanding in the field. No matter how you think you understand the war in Iraq, I would tell you that unless you've been there, your notion of it is probably false. And the reason I say that is because the empirical understanding of that deployment, that effort, cannot be easily put into words. What my battalion did in the Al-Saidiyah sector of Baghdad was not a daily cacophony of fighting against an entrenched enemy, dodging IEDs, and going through daily combat. There was plenty of that. but not on the scale in which you see it in the news. And let me connect that for you for a second. When you watch the news, what you will see quite frequently, not today because Iraq's no longer on the front page, but what you used to see on Iraq is 3 or 4 IED incidents compressed into about a 1 minute to 1 minute and 30-second story. And the incidents occurred over several days in different locations in Iraq. But the mind perceives that as constant and consistent everywhere and always, when it is not so. So what were we doing most of the time? What we were doing was trying to do the only thing that is effective in these kinds of wars of insurgency, and that is trying to change the social action in Iraq by bringing a capability whereby the citizens could improve their quality of life. Sound familiar? Improving the quality of life for us meant doing some things. We rebuilt schools, we built new schools. In Al-Saidiyah, we repaired the 2 major sewage systems. We repaired all of the roads. We spent our time getting the electricity turned back on and functioning for the people. We spent our time employing the local people in Al-Saidiyah in order to inject financial capital and capability. But most importantly, we worked on developing a representative government system that did not exist. I submit to you that as you sit here today, on December 21st, 2009, you don't hear about it in the news because it's not news anymore. What has happened is the United States military has gone a long way to accomplishing its mission and being successful in Iraq, and so it's no longer news because we're not losing, we are winning in Iraq. You also must know that winning happened because your military as an institution is the best thing this country has, bar nothing. Whether you be a reservist, a National Guardsman, or on active duty in any of the services, those Americans understand mission and mission accomplishment. And my point here is when you see the slogan, support the troops, bring them home, is a double entendre that does not resonate with your soldiers, Marines, airmen, and sailors. Not at all.